Okay, so when we think nuclear fission, atom splitting, we usually jump straight to the big ones, right? Uranium, plutonium, massive power. But what of the really weird stuff, the really puzzling secrets about how atoms split? What if they're happening with lighter elements, stuff that kind of breaks the rules we thought we knew? Because that's where it gets, well, really interesting. Experiments are showing that some lighter nuclei, specifically certain isotopes of mercury, they just don't behave as expected when they split.
No, they really don't. And that's the fascinating part, honestly. It's been a real challenge to nuclear theory for decades. Mercury, especially the isotope 190 Hg, it doesn't split neatly down the middle.
Diametrically, you mean?
Exactly. It undergoes what we call asymmetric fission. So the pieces it breaks into are quite different sizes. And even stranger, if you look at the masses of those fragments, you don't get one nice bell curve. You get this double-humped distribution.
Double-humped, like two separate peaks.
Precisely. Like two mountains on a graph instead of one. It tells us there are two sort of preferred ways for that nucleus to break apart. And this wasn't just a minor anomaly. It basically screamed that our understanding, our rulebook for elements lighter than lead the whole sublead region, well, it was missing something fundamental. Okay,
so a real head-scratcher. Given this, totally rule-breaking behavior, what was the big obstacle? What kind of new approach did scientists need to even start figuring this out?
Well, for years, people were really, banging their heads against the wall. The existing models they just couldn't replicate this weirdness. The breakthrough really came from this big international collaboration. Scientists from Science Tokyo were key players. They developed a completely new tool, a 5-dimensional Langen model, a 5D model.
5 dimensions. Okay, that sounds intense.
Yeah.
What does that actually let you do?
Right. It sounds complex, and it is, but it essentially lets us simulate the process dynamically. It tracks the actual shape of the nucleus as it wobbles and stretches right up until the moment it snaps in two. It's not just a static picture. It's like having a super slow-motion camera watching the fission happen, taking into account way more factors, more degrees of freedom, hence the 5D.
Wow. Okay. So our mission today on the deep dive is clear. Let's unpack how this collaborative 5D solution actually manages to predict these really complicated fission results, the fragments, the energies for mercury isotopes like 180 Hg and 190 Hg. And maybe more importantly, what does this tell us that's new? What insights does it give us into how the nuclei split apart, maybe moving beyond just the usual suspects like uranium? All right, so the million-dollar question, did it work? Did this super complex 5D model actually reproduce what you were seeing with 180 Hg in the lab? Because that double hump pattern sounds notoriously tricky.
It absolutely did. That's the really remarkable thing. When the calculations finally ran and the results matched the experiments, that was a proper eureka moment for the team involved. It wasn't just a vague match either. It accurately reproduced that specific, unusual asymmetric fission and the double-humped mass distribution for 180 Hg. It gives us a really realistic simulation, both the distribution of the fragment sizes and their total kinetic energy, the TKE.
That must have been a massive computational lift, though. Was there points where they thought, this is just too complicated, maybe we can't model this?
Oh, I'm sure there were moments of intense challenge. It requires enormous computing power and careful physics. But, the persistence definitely paid off. And connecting this back, the model gave us some really critical insights, things we didn't fully appreciate before.
Like what? What were the big takeaways?
Well, firstly, it showed really clearly that these things called nuclear shell effects, which are kind of like stable configurations or layers inside the nucleus, they don't just disappear when the nucleus gets really energetic or hot.
Shell effects, right? Those sort of magic numbers for stability. And you were saying they stick around even at higher energies. How high are we talking?
We're talking pretty high excitation energies, in the range of about 40 to 50 MeV, mega electron volts. That's a nucleus that's really shaken up. Previously, the thinking was that at these kinds of energies, those subtle shell effects would probably just wash out, become irrelevant. Many older models sort of simplified that or ignored it.
But this 5D model shows they're still playing a role, still influencing how it splits.
Exactly. They persist, and they actively guide the fission pathway, even when the nucleus is highly excited. That was a major finding. And secondly, the model was sophisticated enough to account for something called multi-chance fission.
Multi-chance fission.
Yeah, it's where the excited nucleus might actually spit out a neutron or two before it gets around to splitting into the main fragments. Now, this doesn't massively change the masses of the final big fragments, especially at lower energies. But it turns out it has a pretty significant impact on the total kinetic energy, the TKE.
Ah, okay. So watching the energy gives you clues about this pre-fission neutron emission.
Precisely. It makes the TKE a really valuable signal, a good indicator for studying this multi-chance fission process. It opens up another way to probe what's happening. So, stepping back, this work really pushes our basic understanding of fission quite a bit further. It's not just about the heavy elements anymore. We're getting entirely new insights into this sub-lead region, the elements lighter than lead, which honestly were much less understood in terms of fission dynamics.
So it confirms the model is powerful, but also opens up a whole new area for study.
Definitely. It shows the 5D Langevin approach isn't just a one-off trick for Mercury. It's shaping up to be a really reliable tool for making theoretical predictions across a wider range of nuclei. We're building a better, more fundamental picture of how matter is put together and how it breaks apart.
So thinking about this, for you listening, if we can now model the weird behavior of these tiny nuclei with this kind of accuracy, what does that mean? What other really deep, long-standing mysteries about the atomic world might finally be within reach? And maybe even what kind of unexpected applications could be energy, could be medicine, could be materials, might eventually pop up from really knowing how matter behaves at this incredibly fundamental level. Something to think about.